Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fishing the 262. A good buddy of mine just asked me if I wouldn't mind pouring him up a few swim jigs and making him a few bladed jigs. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to take you guys through my process from start to finish. Let's jump right into it and get started. For the purposes of this video today, you guys, we are going to be using the Do It Molds Poison Tail Jig model PTJ-3-AFS. I'm going to be doing all of these in a 3/8 ounce today, and I'm going to show you something that I do when I make bladed jigs for other people. I don't particularly do this for myself because I just don't care and I don't think it's important, but when they're not for me, I like to make them look as good as humanly possible. So I'm going to set this mold down and I'm going to show you how I accomplish it. So what I have here in my hand is just a little piece of Teflon base pin. I picked these up from Barlow's Tackle. They come in really handy for painting, but it also is a good way if you don't want the hole in the top of your jig where the brush guard or weed guard would go, if you will. So I'm going to set this down in the mold. It's not perfect by any stretch of the means, but it really does give you a little better look on your finished product. So I set that in there, and I get that lined up as best as I can. Try to give you guys a close-up look at that. It's never going to be quite perfect, and I'll show you before we go to the vise. You may get a slight impression. If you don't have it in far enough, you'll get a little bump on the top of your jig that you can usually cut down with a side cutters, or if it's small enough, you can just file it away. But I just try to get it as close as I can to make it look as good as I can and call it a day. It just gives your jig, especially when you're making a bladed jig style, a little more finished appearance to it. Real quick, you guys, here's what everything looks like with that BKK hook in there. Again, I did not do any real formal modifications to this mold to get this hook to fit. I did have to give it a couple of good slams. The metal on this casting is soft enough that you can usually slam it shut, and for a small adjustment like this, it'll work out just fine. Again, I didn't have to use a Dremel tool, anything like that. This is not perfect science either, you guys. You gotta really kind of just take your time. Get that thing lined up as best you can. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to keep that hole from being present there in the cavity. A little bit of filing and it'll look pretty darn nice. And these things swim really good. I've caught a bunch of fish on this. So without further ado, I'm going to set you guys down here and we are going to pour up a couple of heads. I'm going to pour one with the base pin in it, and I'm going to pour one just like this with the Teflon so you guys can kind of see the difference coming out of the mold. All right, you guys, the lead is heated. The mold should be nice and hot. I'm going to go ahead and pour up this bladed jig, and then I'm going to pour one swim jig head on camera. I'll pour the last few off camera, get them knocked out real quick. I'll show you, take you through my painting process, and then we'll go over to the vise and we'll tie one of these up. So you can see I just took that off the top of the pot so that it would heat up. Again, you guys, you can see these lee bottom pours, they drip. There's just kind of no way around it. So just, again, be safe. This lead is over 600 degrees. Top that cavity off just like that. Give that one quick second. We have a nice full pour. And looks like I had my base pin in maybe just a little too far. Pop that guy out of there for you. But again, you can see I don't have a ginormous hole in the top of that jig, just a little depression. It'll be fine. This thing's going to swim great and it's going to behave really well in the water. So real quick, let's get a base pin dropped in there, get our BKK hook placed in there, and then I'll pour you a swim jig really quick and I'll show you the difference of what happens when you pull that base pin out of there. Most of you guys have probably done this a bunch already and are kind of familiar, but I know there's some people that are new to this out there too, and they always have questions. So I'm happy to share the information. If you're looking for more information, please feel free to ask a question in the comment, and I'll do my best to answer it for you. We're just going to top this one off. Give that one quick second. Again, we got another nice full pour here. Let's get that base pin pulled out of there so you guys can kind of see the difference there. Hopefully the camera will focus in on that. That's got a nice base pin hole in it for the weed guard for the swim jig. And then here's the first one that we poured with the Teflon. You can see we let that thing make a full cavity. So I'm going to pour these last few hooks. I don't have a ton of hooks right now. I'm going to give him what I've got. I got more hooks on order, and once those come in, I'll get him the rest of what he's looking for. But I'm going to pour the rest of these off camera, and then when I come back, we'll be painting these up, and then we'll move over to the vise. All right, you guys, you can see that I've gotten these jigs all cleaned up. They're ready to paint. You'll notice a couple of things here. I like to use the Teflon base pins. These things are really cool, you guys. You can pick these up at Barlow, and once the paint starts to layer up on it, you can just flake that off of there, and they're brand new again. Doesn't take much effort at all. Saves you from having to drill out that base pin hole at the end. And then the other thing that I do, and you certainly do not have to take this step, is I put a little bit of heat shrink over my hook eyes. I don't like my jigs to get all gummed up with paint inside the hook eyes, so I like to just go ahead and put a little bit of shrink wrap on there. And the key to that is make sure you pull that off of there before you bake these in your toaster oven. If you don't, it's never going to come off there. Ask me how I know. All right, I'm just going to paint up one of these on camera really quick. Most of you have seen this process, know what this process looks like. I don't think you need me to do this repeatedly, but for the people that are new to the channel, I just want to show you how it works. I am using my alcohol torch from my rod building days. This is what's known as a bubble buster. I like it especially when I film or if I'm doing a volume of jigs because it's silent. I don't have to listen to the heat gun. So we're just going to give this a good 5 or 6, maybe 7 seconds under the heat. We're going to do this one in green pumpkin. The green pumpkin that I'm using is ProTech, and it's a partial can of regular green pumpkin, and it's a partial can of matte green pumpkin that I mixed the bottom halves of each can together. Quick dunk in. You can see I'm a little too hot there. When you get smoke, you know you've overheated your jig, but it's going to be just fine. It's not really going to hurt anything. I don't normally like to go that hot, mostly because that shrink tube gets so hot it hurts your fingers when you take it off. But we'll just do one more really quick here. I'll do one with the base pin so everybody can see that. Again, few seconds on that alcohol torch will be plenty. And I'm going to underheat this one just so you guys can see the difference. You can see, hopefully, that's underheated, right? It still kind of looks kind of rough. That's okay. You just take it back to the heat, and I got a little bit of the lead still showing through, so we'll give it just another second under the heat. Back to the powder coat. That's got a full finish on it now, and that finish will smooth right out when we bake it in the toaster oven. I usually set my toaster oven a little bit cooler than ProTech recommends. I used a thermometer, and I actually shot the temperature of this toaster oven, and it runs a little bit hotter than the thermostat, so I always set it a little bit lower. That's something you're going to have to figure out on your own. Every toaster oven is going to be a little bit different. I would recommend getting a dedicated toaster oven for doing this. I'm going to try to zoom in on mine and show you exactly why. If you get too much paint going sometimes, it will drip, and your wife will not be pleased if you drip powder coat in her baking oven upstairs in the kitchen. So go ahead and make sure that you have a dedicated toaster oven to do this in. I would strongly encourage you not to do this in your wife's oven, but that's just my advice to those of you who have significant others that you have to answer to. So I'm going to do the rest of these off camera. We'll head over to the vise and we'll tie one of these up and we'll finish up this video. Okay, here we are over at the vise. This is a brand new vise for me. I just picked this up about a week or so ago. It is a Renzetti Saltwater Traveler. This vise is way too fancy for a guy that ties at my level, but I got a really good price on it. It's probably going to be the last vise that I ever have to purchase in my lifetime, so I didn't feel too bad about spending the extra money to get it. The nice thing about the saltwater version is it will hold up to an 8/0 hook in it. I don't tie anything that big, but I do sometimes tie on a 5/0. And a lot of the smaller vices won't go with that big of a hook. So the saltwater is a really good option for that. And real quick, I'm going to just try to get you guys, if I can get that to show up. You can see where that Teflon rested in the top of that head, but it's much better than just having a completely empty hole on the top of the jig. So let's get this thing clamped in and let's get to tying. You guys, real quick, I am an amateur. I like doing this. It's fun for me. I am by no means a professional tyer. I'm sure my technique is poor, but it works, and it ends up making him trying to get this centered on the camera a little bit better. But I generally speaking, I like the jigs the way that they turn out, the way that I do this. This is not necessarily the right way to do it. It's how I do it, and you can develop your own style as you go, but just know that I am not a professional fly tyer or professional jig maker. So I'm going to start off. I've got 210 flat wax nylon thread on my bobbin, and I'm just going to get a little bit of a base here. Keep those tabs from slipping around as I tie. Don't need too much. Cut my tag end off here. Get that out of the way. I like to tie in layers, you guys. It takes a little bit longer. If you're a production tyer, it's definitely probably not the way to go about this. But for me, I don't make anything in volume. I'm not selling these jigs. I make my own, and occasionally I make a few for a friend, and that's what I'm doing in this case here. He asked for some green pumpkin with purple. So I'm going to get 5 strands of my purple accent in there, and we're going to go ahead and give that just 1, 2, 3 kind of loose wraps. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to spread out my purple a little bit, get everything situated just the way that I want it, and then we'll cinch that down. And again, you guys, I like this 210 flat wax. Another nice feature about this this new vise is it is a full rotary, but the flat wax nylon is really nice, you guys. You can really get some good tension going on it and not have to worry about ripping it. We went too far with that. And I'm going to try to do this as fast as I can, but I do want this jig to look good because it's not for me. It's for a buddy of mine. I found that even my ugly jigs will work just fine. The fish just aren't that picky. It's normally us, the angler, that's more picky than the fish itself. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you guys, I'm just trying to spread that purple out just a little bit. Now you can see I can pull down on that pretty good. You can see I can actually flex that hook a little bit without tearing. Okay. These are going to be used down in Florida. I imagine these are going to get used on Okeechobee, the Everglades. So this color right here is called Green Pumpkin Roadkill, I believe. Dalmatian Roadkill is the actual color. I get this from fishingskirts.com. It's 428-100. And we're going to put... I don't know if it's going to show up really well on camera, but it's got just a little bit of a gold hue to it. If you've ever been to Okeechobee, you know that golden shiners are, in fact, a big forage base down there, so I don't mind having a little bit of gold coming through in these bad boys. So we're going to position this mostly on the sides of the jig. And again, I'm just going to get that in there. Couple loose wraps to get it held in place, and then I can go ahead and I can manipulate those strands of silicone, get them exactly where I want them. It doesn't have to be perfect, again, you guys. I just try to spread them out a little bit so that they're not sitting right on top of each other. And again, we're going to cinch that down, go ahead and hit it with 1, 2, 3 wraps. We're going to rotate that to the other side. Get a few more strands of our roadkill in there. Big thing here is just try to be careful. Try not to trap any strands of silicone. If you do, it's not the end of the world. You can usually get away with it, or if it's really bad, you can just go ahead and rewrap. But I like to just try not to trap any threads. Now we can cinch that down. A couple, 3 wraps, just like that. Now, again, this is a half tab. This is one of the Zoom colors, and this is a green pumpkin with some gold flake in it. I like to use a lot of different, if I can, a handful of different colors. I just think it makes for a neater appearance than some of the other singular color green pumpkins, you know. The more natural we can make it look, I think, the better. But again, I just don't think the fish are all that picky. I'm going to spread out that gold green pumpkin gold just a little bit on the belly of this jig. Also, guys, if you're new to tying, just understand that whatever color you put down first is going to show to the outside when that skirt flips over. And I'll show you that when we're done here. But get that cinched down, a couple good wraps. And I'm going to do the same on the very top of the jig. Hit that green pumpkin gold in there. And I'm trying to go as quickly as I can without making this thing just ugly. I like to fold it around the thread. That gets me about to the middle point. Get that out of my way. Up top. Get that centered. I'll use the line tie as kind of my guide there. Oh, jeez. Everything goes so smooth until you start trying to do it on camera, you guys. And then the pressure comes on and I fold like a cheap suit. You hear one of my kids running around upstairs. It's a little late for him to be awake, but it is a school night. Hopefully my wife reins that situation in. Spread that out just a little bit. Again, trying to keep all that separate so we don't trap any threads. And we are somehow twisted in there, and I'm not sure how. There we go. Unwrap that. I'm actually going to unwrap that. I don't like the way that's going. I'm just going to start over and get it right. And that's what I'm saying, you guys. Don't be afraid to just undo something if you're not happy with it. Boy, oh boy. My hands are not cooperating. What is going on there? There we go. That should be better. Get a couple good wraps in there. Yeah, I can hear my wife yelling at my youngest son up there because he's not in bed. It's almost 10 o'clock on a school night. The trials and tribulations of parenthood, you know? Get that straightened out. You can see I got that a little bit twisted, so we'll get that straightened out a little bit. Boy, that's in tough shape. I'm not happy with that. And again, you guys, I'm just a guy that makes stuff in the basement. I'm not a production tyer. I'm not a professional jig maker, so bear with me. But I think you guys will see that a little bit of patience, a little bit of time can go a long way, and you'll produce some really good results at the end of the day. The other thing too, you guys, if you don't want to tie or you don't have a vise, you can use the banded skirts. There's nothing wrong with that. I prefer a tied collar just because I'm a guy that likes to skip a lot of docks, and it frustrates me when the skirt slides down the hook shank when I'm skipping docks, which has been known to happen with the rubber bands from time to time. It doesn't happen often, but it is frustrating when it does happen, so that's why I try to tie all mine. You can wire tie too. I am not good at wire tying at all. I'm just never happy with the way that the jig ends up looking when I wire tie. So now we're going to get into our two different other green pumpkins. This one is Army Green Pumpkin Dalmatian. We're going to set that up right on the top side of this jig. This is going to be a full tab. I cut it in half. Again, you guys, I like to tie in layers. I just feel like I get a good, clean looking jig when I tie in layers. You do what works for you. If it's the rubber bands, again, no judgment here. I think there's a lot of ways to go about things in the tackle crafting hobby, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way. It's about developing a style that works for you and gives you a result that you're happy with. Gets you fishing a lure that maybe not all your buddies have access to, or if you fish in some local tournaments or jackpot tournaments, you can tie up something a little bit different than those fish are used to seeing day in and day out, you know. That's one thing that I appreciate about making my own. Cinch that down. I feel like I'm really drawing this video out, you guys. I apologize, but I think you guys will get the gist, and I think that you guys will be well on your way to tying your own jigs if you want to go about it this way. And believe me, you guys, you do not have to buy a Renzetti. I tied for 15 years on what I call a starter vise. I picked it up on Mudhole. I don't know, it was 20, 30, $40 tops. I don't even think it was $40. But I tied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jigs on that over the span of 15 years before it finally collapsed. And it was like a spring-loaded. I actually still have it over there. And it just wouldn't hold the hook anymore. It was the spring on it was like so stretched out that I just had to replace it. Cinch that down, a few wraps. We got just 2 more ties to make, and then we can finish this jig off, you guys. I appreciate you hanging in with me on this one. I know this one's longer than my normal videos, and I know that time is precious, and I hate taking up this much of your time, but I just want you guys to see how I do it. You could tie these tabs on in one shot without cutting them in half and expedite your process that way. I like to just do them in half tabs because I feel like I can spread them out, get everything nice and even. Cinch that down nice and tight again. One more tab to go, you guys, and then I'll show you how I finish this. Again, the way I finish a jig would make a traditional fly tire probably cringe because I don't use any fancy knots. I don't have a whip finishing tool. Here comes my dog. See if she makes an appearance on camera. Sometimes she'll jump up on my lap here and sometimes she won't. What are you doing, Stella, huh? All right, we're almost there. I'm going to spread these last bits out, get them even, lined up to the other half tab that I just put on there, like so. Again, if you can find a vise that rotates, it doesn't have to be a true rotary. Like this Renzetti is what they call true rotary, so that guys that tie crappie jigs and stuff like that or smaller flies can use this handle right here and just rotate the jig that way, or the fly that they're tying that way. Again, no, Stella, get down. Get this thing a few good solid wraps, get this thing cinched down really nice. I like to rotate it around, make sure that my collar is relatively even. I got a spot where I'm not as wide as the rest of it. Again, this is just little detail stuff that probably doesn't matter at the end of the day. I just like for it to be nice and even. All right, I feel pretty good about that. I'll show you how I finish this off. We got one little area of silicone showing there too, so I want to get that covered up. I really don't get too worked up about this stuff, but again, this one's not for me, so I want this one to be a little bit cleaner than I would normally make it. And there we trapped a thread. There we trapped a strand. Luckily, it only had 1 wrap on it. That's an easy fix. All right, this is how I finish, you guys. I think if you've seen any of my other videos, you know how I do this. It's not what most tires would call the proper technique. This is an old piece of 10-pound braided fishing line. Fold it in half. I'll leave a loop out here over by the hook eye. And we're just going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times around. Cut that off. Come up, down through the loop that I left here. Grab a hold of it. I got some tension on it. I just got to fish my tag ends out of there. And we're going to just pull that right through. This is how you finish a rod guide, and that's where I learned this from, you guys, from my rod building. Now you can see I got my tag in there. Trim that off. I like to use, whenever I tie with silicone, I use the Loon water-based head cement. Just a couple drops. It's going to seal those threads off. It's going to make sure... Whoa, that came out really fast. That was almost alarming how fast that came out. We got a leak going on here or something? Yeah, that's not on there tight. That's why. But again, just a couple drops of that goes a long ways. And we'll rotate that around. I don't know why that's just come gushing out of there like that, but it's okay. The nice thing about the water base is that's going to dry completely clear. If you used super glue or anything like that, it would show up all over your silicone when it was done. We're going to give this thing just a minute to dry, and then I can actually trim these right now while we're in the vise. I just grab them all together. Same thing on this side. We will let that dry, like I said, off camera. And then when that's dry, we'll attach the blade. I'll show you the blades that I use right now, you guys. I have tried every method possible. Split rings. I've tried bending out the hook eyes and then trying to shut them again after I put the blade on. I have used different little... I don't know what the part number is, but it's for some of the do-it molds. You can make a modified hook eye with that. And for me, you guys, best bang for the buck is these guys right here. This is just a queen tackle switchblade. I think the blade starts well. It gives good action. I have caught a ton of fish on these things. I pretty much primarily I fish either a jackhammer or I fish my homemade. I don't really fish any other. I've messed with the Thunder Cricket a little bit. I like the jackhammer better. And this is a really good alternative for when you're making your own. It's easy to use and it gets the job done, you guys. There's no messing around with all these other parts. All right, you guys, I've got the eyes glued on. I've got the blade attached. The eyes that I use are these guys right here. They're called Living Eyes, and they're from Fish Skull. I picked these up at my local fly shop, but I do believe you can pick these up at Bass Pro Shops in their fly shop as well, but they're really good looking eyes. I do put just a tiny, tiny dab of Loctite, and when I say tiny, I mean tiny. You got to be careful with the super glue when you use these eyes, because if you get too much, they'll fog over. But you can see this is what the jig looks like. We got the purple coming through. You can see some of that gold from the roadkill coming through there. And then we've also got the gold flake from the green pumpkin gold zoom tabs in there. This is probably a little bit more skirt than I would prefer on my own personal jigs, but I like to tie them a little on the full side when I tie for my buddies. They can remove strands if they want to. Obviously, it's difficult to add back in, but this video has gotten to be way too long, you guys. I sincerely appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys found some of the information I presented in this video here useful. Thanks again for sticking around with me for such a long video. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support you show on the channel. I'll see you guys on the next one. Tight lines, everybody.